All right, perfect. Thank you everybody for being here today. My name is Rishi Kapil. I'm the moderator for this very exciting session. And you can read about what the session is all about. It is on the mind, the leadership factor. Now, before I introduce all the illustrious panelists and speakers that we have, I'll just take a minute to put out what the conversation is going to be all about today. Audiences are also asking questions. You can put that perspective in your mind. So when you look at all in the mind is something you use as a word in multiple contexts. But the health of the mind is something which gets spoken, but maybe we have a conversation which says whether it is executed or enabled enough or not. So mental health is a very important part of the influence which seems that leaders have on their employees, human being having the impact on another human being's mental health. And employees have somewhere certainly also started to hold the leaders responsible for their own mental wellness. And at this point of time, and probably pandemic also added some fuel to the fire, where the linkage between workplace psychological safety and mental wellness has generally been agreed that it has a very important place in the way the workplace operate. And when I talk about these things, you would have picked up some words. There is mental illness, there is psychological safety, there is leader, there are people who are working with the leaders. And today the panel actually is so illustrious that it will encompass all the elements of this conversation that we're talking about. So you have professionals leading organizations from HR services, from technology, from data analytics and thought leadership, from consumer durables and consumer goods, from the sense of psychology and training. Which I mean, panels like these are very sensitive. It is extremely honoring that we have all of you on the panel today. So for the next 2-3 minutes, please allow me to introduce the panel to all of you, and then I will take the conversation forward. So to begin with, I would like to welcome Sonal Arora to the panel. She's the country manager of the GI Group Holding in India, and she has extensive experience of more than 2 decades in the industry in media and HR services outsourcing. Started her career with Times of India Group and then worked with Finley before joining the GI Group. And she has handled multi-specific assignments in her career in terms of business planning and strategy, P&L and operations. And then within the HR services, involved in successfully building multiple business lines in the areas of staffing, payroll outsourcing, and compliances. And along with building businesses, he has leading experience in diverse cross-functional and multi-customer vocational team management. Graduate from St. Stephen's College in Delhi, postgraduate in business administration from St. Joseph's Pune, where I live. He strongly believes and writes on subjects like job creation, labor law reforms, and empowerment of women in the workplace. Sonal, thank you very much for joining us here, and we look forward to your inputs and ideas on this. Allow me to introduce Arun Prabhu to all of you, the founder and director of ValueWorks Business Solutions. And he heads ValueWorks, and it's a research and analytics company which is out of Bangalore. And we were just talking about how technology has completely fluidated the geographical boundaries where we can connect with everyone from various parts of the world or the country. And with over 15 years of experience in building data analytics and research solutions within US, within Canada, and the Middle East, he holds an engineering degree from Bangalore University, a PG from PacMy Manipal. And prior to his entrepreneurial experience, he's worked with electrical engineering firms like ABB and Alstom. So ValueWorks, in a nutshell, is the building thought leadership reports that are data-driven. So whenever you need to go back to an empirical evidence on what is in it for me, it is the data, and Arun's company specializes in that. It builds on the foundation of delivering advanced predictive analytics based on large volumes of data from businesses in diverse industries. And I believe data is something which is generated in terabytes or gigabytes on a per second basis. And then they weave the data together from variety of sources. They do in-depth analysis and they build a compelling narrative. So having data and making it more understandable with people like me is something the skill which Arun and his company has specialized in, and delivering on a data to business story is value proposition. ValueWorks currently helps its client publish over 35 thought leader reports every year, extremely intriguing, Arun. There will be a lot of more stuff to learn from you. Thank you for the panel, for joining the panel today. And let me move on to Anupal Banerjee, the Chief People Officer of FSS Technologies. And with over 2 decades of HR experience in technology, IT consulting and services and media organizations. Interestingly, before joining FSS, Arun was the Chief Human Resource Officer and Company Ethics Counselor at Tata Technologies. He led the company's people technology strategy, the HR strategy, the HR activities globally in support of overall business growth. So a lot of HR and business is now interrelated and interconnected. And particular focus on OD and effectiveness of the organization design, developing very, very comprehensive learning and development organizations. And along with HR, he also works on the global IT facilities and functions at Tata Technologies. A very, very unique mix over there. And earlier, as the SVP or HR at Viacom 18, I mean, it's name and media and entertainment, everybody recognizes. He also held leadership roles at global technology and professional services firms, which you all know, like Capgemini, Infosys, and has spent time in US and Mexico as well. And he serves on the board of governors of Triple IT Ranchi and is also a part of the Global Executive Council of Workplace at Facebook. He was the co-founder of a startup that was working in the space of mental well-being. And being a mechanical engineer and having completed the advanced lecture program from University of Michigan, the Stephen and Ross School of Business. Thank you very much, Anupal, for joining us here, and I'm sure your perspective will be extremely interesting and diverse. So look forward to our conversation. Let me move on to Rishma Alak, the Head of Talent Diversity and Organizational Culture at Henkel India, another name which you would have in the chemical consumer goods industry. And our experience is extremely wide and diverse across these industries and manufacturing sector in Europe and Indian subcontinent. It is currently heading the talent, diversity and organizational culture with core expertise in HRBP, global talent management strategy, organization development, performance management, cultural change, and DNI. Amazing plethora of competences there. And she has a master's in human resources and OB, and an extremely passionate communicator and trainer. He has been associated with Huntsman Corporation, Reliance, NIS Norton, Spanco, NIS Spain Talent. And she's passionate about cultural transformation and leading people agenda for high impact visibility. Rishma, thank you very much for giving us your time. We really look forward to being enlightened with your experiences. And let me introduce Dr. Rashmi Prakash, the executive coach, psychologist, and corporate trainer with us on the panel today. And tirelessly working for the last 2 decades in this novel profession. And our values are based on consistency, quality, and clarity, which is very well aligned to our profession. And the whole cusp of being able to psychologically understand people and coach them is something which is very critical and important at the same time. And she supports corporate leaders, individuals, and business owners on their journeys towards being effective, productive, and successful. And I'm sure she comes across a lot of psychological situations in how the mind operates and how these 3 diverse ecosystems of leaders, individuals, and startup owners navigate themselves through that challenge. And she engages with clients in thought-provoking and creative process-based inquiries to maximize their professional and personal outcome. And she's a spiritual coach as well, supports individuals to connect with themselves at a deeper level and find who they truly are. So maybe, matching the passion and profession is something which she supports people to do, and provides counseling and therapy to individuals and groups, including areas of expertise in behavioral disorders and anxiety reduction, stress management, depression, bipolar, PTSD, and many more, specializing in women mental health management and grief as well. And trains executives as a corporate trainer and provides them healthy habits. So habits are lifelong in which to improve their overall efficiency, dealing with stress, anxiety, and depression, and many more. So, thank you very much to be with us today. And I'm sure this is going to be such an interesting and exciting diversity of conversations. I believe the audience and we all are looking forward to this today. So without much ado, Sonal, I would invite you to do the context setting of the conversation so that we all know what to expect, what happened in All in the Mind, the leadership factor report. Once I invite Arun in due course, and we take it forward from there. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rishi, for this wonderful introduction of the panel and the program for the day. To start with, I must sincerely thank all the panelists, Anupal, Rishima, Arun, Dr. Rashmi, and of course you, Rishi, for taking out the time to be a part of this very important conversation. Just to give you, context of why at GI Group Holding India we are doing this, I think we can all agree that last few years have been, very dynamic and challenging times for everyone in the world. Most of us have seen probably the first ever pandemic, and some of us fortunately have not even seen wars or other life-changing events in India, because we were all born post-partition, post the 1962-1971 war. So for us, the pandemic has been pretty much the most global life-changing phenomena that we have experienced. And as societies evolve over a period of time, the challenges that they face, any society evolves, the challenges that it faces, they also evolve and change over a period of time. So sometimes these changes and challenges, sort of transcend on us suddenly, the way it happened with the COVID-19 pandemic. And sometimes this challenge approaches us very slowly, steadily, and noiselessly. I think the mental health related challenges are something that fall in the latter category, where for the last several decades, maybe due to the change in lifestyle, due to change in, we are moving from an industrialized society to a digital society, and then the next, industrial revolution 2.0. So as economies, as society, the pace is different from country to country, but we are seeing a transformation. And because of this transformation, there are new challenges emerging. So the impact of the mental health related challenges, is not that visible, and probably because it is slow, it is often, especially in India, ignored. Now, India as a country has its own challenges. We have poverty, we have unemployment, we have lack of education infrastructure. So one would like to think that, is this really something that we should be concerned about, or is this more of a European, North American, problem? The quote unquote, if I may say, the developed world problem, rather than a problem for India, which is a developing world country, But as it happens, the mental health related challenges are very critical for us also now to address, because there is enough and more evidence that the impact of this issue on Indian economy, Indian society, can soon really, become a very big challenge if not addressed in time. So according to a 2017 Lancet report, 1 in 7 Indians suffers from some kind of a mental health issue. Again, according to another report of WHO, which actually, like this Lancet report, predates the pandemic, India's economic loss due to mental health related challenges between just 18 years of 2012 and 2030 will be close to $1 trillion. Now, these estimates are all pre-COVID. Post-COVID, as we all know and agree, the situation has become much worse. So this is not something as a country, as an economy, as a society, we can ignore anymore. Now, where does corporate India fits in? The fact is that work is a very important part of our daily lives. It is something which adds value to our sense of self, especially in a young country like India. It also gives economic empowerment, social empowerment, and a sense of belonging to people. And while it is very easy to say that we should try and compartmentalize, but the fact is that when people come to work, any stress related to workplace will go back to them when they either leave the workplace physically, or if they are working even in a virtual scenario, shut down their laptops. And if the stress is not related to work, if it is something personal, but then also it is unrealistic to expect that people will not bring it to the workplace. So one way or the other, I think this is not something which we can ignore or compartmentalize and say that, you know, employers or corporate organizations don't have to deal with it. We have to deal with it. This is something, you know, it's a challenge which is growing every day, and I think the sooner we acknowledge, the better it is. Also, the problem is the lack of information, awareness, and understanding on this subject. So it is in this perspective, you know, that GI Group Holding India decided that we will initiate a series of annual reports on this subject. We did our first report, which was more of, you know, just an assessment of the extent of the problem in 2021. And during that you know, report, as a part of that report, what we discovered was that while everybody, employers, employees, and mental health experts acknowledge the pervasiveness of this issue, but there is some you know, disagreement or disconnect between leaders and employees on what contributes in terms of workplace factors, the extent to which workplace, you know, impacts an employee's mental health, and within that, what are the factors. So we decided that for 2022, as a continuation of this theme, we will delve a little bit more into the leadership factors which impact and influence employees' mental health. I think there is no denying the fact that in corporate India, especially, you know, given our a little traditional nature of our society, which ultimately finds its way into the way our business organizations are run as well. You know, we don't question authority, we accept authority, we get you know, overwhelmed when talking to a boss. These are very common phenomena in our organizations. So the leaders, you know, play a very strong role in you know, in this aspect. So that's the reason we decided to deep dive into it, that are the leaders aware of the extent of the problem? If they are aware of the extent of the problem, do they have the necessary support system from their organization, their board, and also the resources to deal with the problem, you know? So in partnership with ValueWorks, we decided to commission this study, and I think Arun is going to take us, all of us, through the key findings of the report. And after this event, the report can be downloaded from our website. We will display the URL to download the report once we conclude the webinar. Essentially, you know, it all ties up to our belief that people must be supported to work throughout an extended working life. You know, lifespans are increasing. There was a time when people would either retire at the age of 50, 55, or sometimes, you know, pass on. But now, majority of us are looking at a lifespan of 70, 75, and people want to continue. And healthy, you know, health improvement in healthcare infrastructure also has made it possible for people to visualize, you know, continuing to work beyond the traditional age of 55, 60. But this requires focus on well-being, and well-being is not just physical well-being or economic well-being, it is also mental well-being. So it is with this perspective that I hand the floor back to you, Rishi, and you know, we can continue with Arun sharing with us the key insights of the report.
Absolutely. So before I invite Arun, just you know, 30 seconds of what amazed me was that there's a loss of $1 trillion, which is actually associated to challenges of mental wellness. I think it's very good that the industry is putting statistics on it. And since I belong to a university, I can vouch by experience that we are no different than a corporate. When we talk about the ways of working, in a university also we have sales, marketing, strategy, operations, finance, HR roles. And many a times, you know, that integration becomes very difficult to say that there's an academic ecosystem and a corporate ecosystem, and that becomes more exciting when, you know, we hear Arun that it's actually omnivorous across the universe, irrespective of the kind of job that there's a game that changed. And the other thing which you touched upon, developing versus developed countries, I think we learned a lot from the other panelists as well on that aspect. But this adds to the complexity of how important and critical this is. So Arun, over to you. Numbers, the data, the way it can be better interpreted by people like us. Thank you very much for agreeing to make it happen, and over to you for the further conversation on that.
Thank you, Rishi. And thanks, Sohan, for that very comprehensive overview of mental health in India and especially across India. Like Sohan mentioned, the 2021 report indicated that there's a significant disconnect between how leaders and employees perceive the impact of leadership on employment. And therefore, the GI group decided that in 2022, we are going to explore this linkage between leadership and how leaders impact employment. So, this research project involved a large-scale survey that encompassed nearly 500 leaders across organizations in India and 1,000 plus employees across various other organizations, not necessarily overlap. It also included the wisdom and intelligence and insights from three experts, two from the mental health fraternities, which included Dr. Rashmi Prakash and Dr. Vikul Rastogi, and a corporate leader, Mr. Rahul Gautam. Now, we meshed all this hard data as well as expert opinion together, carried out the analysis, and I would like to focus on the three key takeaways that we have from this exercise. Um, they are as follows. Number one, obviously, is leaders' responsibility. Um, an overwhelming majority of leaders that we surveyed acknowledge the impact they have on employmental health. Employees as well as leaders agree on a range of factors such as psychological safety, the concept that employees will not be targeted, they'll not be humiliated or punished for mistakes they make or the thoughts that they express. Workplace factors, both tangible like resources and facilities and intangible like culture, leadership traits such as personality, mannerisms, behavior of leaders, and leaders' own mental health that may all have an impact on employmental health. While they do agree on these aspects, there is a need for a larger proportion of leaders to acknowledge the responsibility they have towards employmental health. And here, psychological safety is a great place to have this conversation started. The second key finding that we delved into is the organizational support leaders receive. There is a widely held perception that leaders do not obtain adequate mental health support or either support for their mental health initiatives from organizations, their respective organizations. A small minority of organizations have a formal policy-based approach to manage mental health of their employees. On the one hand, one third of the leaders stated that they receive formal training in managing mental health, both their own as well as the employees. But on the other hand, surprisingly, less than one fourth of the leaders that we surveyed said that they receive budgetary support for managing employee mental health to help them make key decisions related to the matter. Thirdly and finally, leaders and employees there's a need for leaders and employees to closely align on a range of attributes, workplace attributes that affect employmental health. Mostly they do. Across many attributes, leaders as well as employees agree and align themselves. However, on two key factors, for example, workplace stress, sensitive factors such as workplace stress, and an even more sensitive factor in today's times, job security. On factors such as these, the twain doesn't seem to meet as much as we desire it to. So there's a need to trigger a discourse which can actually help close the gap. So these are the three key findings that we had from the report, besides a whole lot of other statistics. And I'd be glad to quote more statistics and opinions from the experts as we go along, and looking forward to the insights and opinions of the other panelists as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Arun. And while this conversation is all about all in the mind and the leadership perspective, the opinions that we will ask the panelists also are, in line with what has come out from the report. So maybe in due course of time, you may need to add some value to those conversations as well. And I'm sure the audience at the end of the session are keenly looking forward to be able to download the report. And maybe once they have the report, a lot of questions might come on everybody's way, whether it is through LinkedIn or whether it is through email. But while these conversations are still bringing the fact that there is something called psychological safety and stress at the workplace which needs to be identified, I'm sure what leaders would be thinking right now is, how do we really catch those kind of symptoms at the workplace, and how much should we, at what time should we really do things which does not make us very intrusive at all. So let me take the conversation forward with Anupal, and this also depends upon some statistics which came out from the report. So Anupal, this conversation is in two parts, and let me just narrate what is on my mind at this point of time. So based upon the GI report, it says that the 93% of the employees and 73% of the leaders who were the data which was created for the collected for the report, we believe that workplace psychological safety has a very significant effect on the employee's mental wellness. Now, so these are statistics: 93% and 73% in the employee end and the leaders end. So, in terms of being able to say what is the importance of understanding and recognizing mental health challenges at the workplace, what would be your, say, opening conversation to it as to why does it become very, very important to understand and recognize mental health challenges at the workplace? But more so, if you can throw some light in your experience, what has changed pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and expected to change post-pandemic? Because now probably pandemic is a 5th page or a 6th page news, while it was a front page news for 2 years almost. So there is an era we have gone through, pre, during, post. So one is the importance to recognize this actually as a challenge, and second is, what do you think, in your opinion, has changed in these 3 phases of pre, during, and post? Over to you, Anupal.
Yeah, thank you, Rishi. First of all, good afternoon to all the viewers, and good afternoon to the esteemed panel as well. I do want to take the opportunity and compliment Sonal, you and GI, and Arun, the study that you talked about. And to me personally, a topic such as mental well-being is very, very key. As Rishi briefly talked about, I've been associated with very closely with a startup of some very, very bright young guys wanting to do something on the mental well-being area called Tatsam. So it's personal, it's of very key interest, and I'm delighted to be a part of the conversation today and help move this in whichever way possible. So Rishi, there were some important words in that question, and allow me to pick them up as I go through it over the next 2-3 minutes. The first word was understanding mental well-being. The second word to me that jumped out was recognizing mental well-being. And the third was, therefore, what should we do? And allow me to share, some of you are way more qualified, but I can only share what I have experienced as a practitioner of, human resources in my previous organizations and now. And I'll try and include the second part of the question, that how are things pre-pandemic, what happened during pandemic, and how things move forward as I go through these 3 operating words of that question. Pre-pandemic, and this is a little to do with the word called understanding. And if I can visualize this, on one side is the community that should understand this a little better. And I think some years back, mental well-being was all about EAP, the Employee Assistance Program, and HR, my own fraternity, will send out these flyers which will have a name and a number and somebody behind that phone number who would, and we would expect our employees or our own colleagues to call up that number and go through certain process. And then you had things like somebody would say basic difference between, I don't know if people understand the difference between wellness and well-being. I don't know if people understand the difference between physical exercise versus holistic well-being of an individual. Yeah, and I'm saying all of this from a pure workplace environment, not individual life space. Yeah. So I think there's a matter around helping our stakeholders understand mental well-being much more comprehensively. And the stakeholders, I break them up into three. One are the leaders themselves, which I think the report calls out in spades. Second is the fraternity of human resources themselves. And third is the larger employee base. And the second part of understanding on the other side is what exactly is well-being? Is it EAP? Is it wellness? Is it exercise? Is it much more holistic? And so that's the part around understanding. Let me move towards recognizing. I'll take a very specific example. In my previous organization, when and we were right in middle of the pandemic, I was very hesitant to launch a survey for the first time, asking our employees to talk about what they feel about mental well-being. And there were, I think, all of 19 questions. I was hesitant that the reporting would be less than 6-7% of people. When I saw the report back, and we gave a window of 72 hours, 53% of people responded. And I had close to about 60,000 different responses that came in against those questions. But what was extremely interesting was the average time spent by an user to answer that question. So the questionnaire should have completed in 6 minutes. The average time that I saw was 19.5 minutes, and there was no drop off in the number of people who answered question number 1 and question number maybe 14 or 15, which meant that it was important. Now, as I sort of look at recognition, the point I'm trying to make is that I think we all recognize it today. We all, if we are responsible leaders, we recognize it. I think the issue is about quantifying it as to what it really means and deeply understand the quantification. And I think because quantification is not that clear, progress or impact of it on a P&L is not understood by the leader. And thereby, whenever something important comes up, the first thing that you want to throw away is a topic of this nature. So I think, that's how I really see it, that all good folks in whichever work space they are in, they recognize it. It is just that our ability to better quantify it and thereby measure it on a sustainable level. And lastly, what should we do on both the sides, which is understanding as well as recognition. And I think what should we do in the workplace? I've always felt that for anything to sustain, you need a hook in the process. And the hook has to be found quite thoughtfully. On the understanding side, I think I see that over a period of time, my sense is engagement and well-being will come together. That's my personal sort of sense or evaluation of how this whole thing is moving. So we've been making progress around employee engagement, which is going towards experience, etc. But I see that for it to become a little more holistic, well-being will get subsumed under overall employee experience and engagement, and those two fields may come together. And on the recognition side of things, and this is possibly the most important point from my side, and I've thought about it quite deeply. On the recognition side, I think one of the things that employers should consider is not to view well-being as a individual matter, but as a group matter. What I mean by that is when we force an EAP and say that if you are vulnerable, call this number, I think what happens is we isolate somebody even further because he or she is vulnerable, and then view that individual in a particular way. If I start to view this whole thing in a collective and a group manner, because see, all of us, irrespective of what level of mental well-being fitness we have, we can get better. So if I can get better at engagement, why can't I get better at a group level when it comes to well-being? And what it does as a process is it takes the individual taboo and the resistance away to some extent. And I think recognizing this as a group matter to improve upon, irrespective of which level of scoring we are, I think would be something worth a try. So that's what really I think about the long answer to your question, Rishi. Back to you.
Anupal, thank you for that. And it's so simple in terms of the ability to understand and recognize, I think is a very, very concerted say compartment where people probably going forward can first realize whether they really understand what it means before recognizing what needs to be done. As you rightly mentioned, there have been corporates even, I mean, with no disrespect to them. I think everybody tries their best to make them. And EAPs have definitely been rolled out, and I think the jury is still out in terms of whether whether the implication and the impact has been to the level of not, and it also comes with a pinch of salt of the monetary implications of the EAPs to a level of support which somebody can get from that. So, for as you rightly mentioned, are we in a stage of having understood what it means and then recognize what needs to be done? Or are we already doing things without understanding what it means? I think that's a question which we can debate for time to come. Any other opinion from any of the other panelists before I move on to the next? Yes, please, Lakshmi.
Yes, I understand and I completely agree with Anupal that when you said that recognizing and understanding, there is a difference in between knowing and actually knowing. We all know that. So at times we think we know, but we don't. That's the thing. And then when it comes to EAP, employee assistance provider, and I got what you said about the group thing, that if well-being, yes, well-being should be a combined thing in the organization, but EAP needs to be there hand in hand, because it's not one size fits all when it comes to mental health disorders. So same stress will affect you differently and me differently. So in group, when it comes and there is a lot, and when there is not that level of deep understanding, then again blame game and discrimination and everything starts. So yes, well-being has to be at the same platform for everyone, but when it comes to disorder, EAP has to be there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Rashmi. In fact, I was about to also talk about Anupal's experiences of working with a startup in the space or other startups, so to say. I believe it's time startups recognize that mental wellness and emotional well-being, the practice should start the day the founder has started the company, rather than waiting it to become a 5,000 people company, and that the context of now something is happening and we are not able to control it. So maybe it's a subtle guidance from the panel to the startups as well, that when you have just started, make this as a mandate to have an emotionally resilient organization, rather than reaching a stage and then realizing that now the organization is retiring, not the people inside. because things cannot move ahead. So thank you both of you for giving your thoughts and opinions. Let me move to Rishma and talk about her experiences in the corporate world. And this is a question which is there everywhere in the ecosystem, but probably uh, sometimes it's not spoken much. So leaders always have an intent, most of them, to be able to make the things right and make the workplace emotionally more resilient, give more power to people who can develop new services, tools, products, and services for emotional and mental well-being. But still, there are showstoppers. So there are questions in the boardrooms which are being asked in terms of what are the policies which can facilitate a more emotionally better workplace, or what are the objectives which such a policy should have. But to cut the long story short, people talk about the monetary budgets that are needed for making those policies executable. So there is a policy and then there's a cost of executing that policy. So when leaders have the intent, Rishma, do you still believe that they get the right policy support, the right budgetary support to actually make things happen? What have been your general experiences?
Okay, thanks. I hope Rishi can hear me well. First of all, thanks so much for having me a part of this discussion. And it's well, like Anupal and Rashmi also mentioned, this is a very dear topic, very, very close to the heart. Lived through it personally, gone through it personally, so I could really talk about these topics dearly at a personal level as well. Rishi, the question really you asked is about, what showstoppers, what comes in the way, right, in making this possible. And if I'm posed with this question by a group of people, and I would ask the group further on, what is the cost of well-being? Or imagine having a workforce whose well-being is in question. What was the cost of having such people working with you? And you're talking about having bigger ambitions of achieving a business with 4x, 5x, or 6x ambition to win. So imagine a situation where you're having a workplace where well-being of people is not to its best, and you're expecting people to deliver good, not just good, great performance. Okay, today nobody is talking about good performance. Today everyone is talking about great performance. So the question is really about, are we okay with that? Then let's the conversation in a different direction. But I think we have come to a situation that if you don't challenge back the thinking process of people, we're never going to make it. As much as I have seen through my experiences, I'm going to talk about the employer that I work with right now. I think it's really walk the talk in that sense, that wellness, and it's not a board agenda. It's no longer a board agenda. It's an agenda which everyone needs to be in together. And this only means that we need to do it together, and we need to voice out together about our challenges and difficulties, what will come in our way, and most importantly, what do we need to do to execute as well. So in my view, budget and policies and things like that are really no showstoppers at all. In my view, if there's a very clear intent, and that's the answer I picked up from the question as well, leaders have the intent. And I think that's the call. If the intent is very clearly articulated, committed, and we're absolutely committed to it, nothing comes our way. I always think about workplace as a very, I look at it this way, okay? I'll give you an example, maybe a little odd, but let me give you an example, okay? Workplace is like a garden, and if you want the garden to look nice and glow, fresh flowers and things like that, you've got to create the right infrastructure, support, environment, and the climate around it for things to work well, right? You can't be fixing every plant and every flower around you, and we've all learned this as well. So if you want to create the right climate around you so that people flourish, grow, and nurture, the infrastructure support is a given. It is not a matter of policy mandates. It's not a matter of X number of dollar value attached to per person. It is a given, and this doesn't mean it has to come back to a specific per person cost budgeting. It just means we have to do it. So that's non-negotiable in my view. I was also hearing to Anupal as well, and even Sonal as well at the beginning of this conversation. Sonal, you mentioned earlier as well that, topics like war, topics like, a pandemic and things like that, actually we haven't experienced it. I haven't experienced it. I heard from my parents that they had seen the India-Pakistan war and the India-China war. I never heard about these things. And in my view, this is a difficult time for all of us because, long time ago as management professionals, we studied the Maslow's theory of motivation. 1943, Maslow's theory was actually written in 1943, which talks about, safety and psychological safety and step one, and further ahead of the pillar as well. Guys, this is a time where we are actually living the Maslow's theory. We live it every day, but today this is more in focus. So imagine you talk about topics like, psychological safety, and you talk about topics like, physiological safety and things like that. Everything is being in question. So if you want to really have a workforce which is empowered, which is motivated, which is driven, you want the best out of it, these are non-negotiables for me. It's just like the garden. You want to make sure that everything is nice and gloomy, it's pretty and stuff like that. But you got to nurture it with the right manure and the right support system so that the right wellness can be created out of that workspace. And for me, this is a non-negotiable topic. So, I clearly believe that this is an agenda that needs to be fought for. If things are not working in the right direction, as leaders, as corporate leaders, corporate India leaders, this is an agenda we got to fight for. And if this means that you got to have some tough wars with people, go for it. It's worth it. I'm sure Anupal would recognize, and so would Rashmi as well, that this is one agenda we cannot afford to have in a backseat. One leave policy cut, acceptable, but wellness topic cut, not acceptable that way. So that's my personal view about it. So I really think it's about we are responsible to create the right climate for our workforce and make a happy climate. Factors are going to be there which are going to detriment the overall climate around us, but we are responsible to create a balanced climate, if not a hostile one for sure. So that's my personal view about it. Rishi, thanks for the question.
Thank you very much, Rishma. Before I put in some thoughts, is there anybody else who wants to give their opinion? Okay.
No, that's fine. She said it all and she said it very nicely. Well done, Rishma.
No, we echo the same view. The smiles on the face, on the camera can view it. We echo the same view.
No, in fact, I can tell you. So I teach the subjects of HR in a college, and it is, first year student also has this question in the classroom, that which subject will train us to create emotionally resilient workplaces. And it's like a mandate which I go ahead into the education ecosystem and say, put a subject. Why do you want them to actually transition into the industry and then realize that this was needed? So maybe it's just an appeal to everybody in the audience and all the panelists that please, go to your education network and insist on a subject on emotional well-being to be taught for 30 hours rather than they actually coming and getting surprised. And to the level of showstoppers, I think a lot of students also approach us and say that is there a certification in emotional wellness? Like if I want to decorate a house from inside, there's an interior designer certificate. If I want to create a house from outside, there's an architect certificate. But then who will even, when I become, say, an HR specialist or a generalist in a company, and if I say that I have the idea to make an emotionally resilient workplace, will I get a pushback to say, are you qualified enough to give an opinion? Actually, students are looking at short-term certifications, which at least lets them put it in their resumes to say that, okay, I've learned about talent acquisition, I've learned about organization development, but I'm also certified to actually take practices of emotional well-being. So as we talk about, as you rightly mentioned, Maslow's theories doing the rounds, but it is being practiced subconsciously and certainly much more than earlier. But let's bring this down to generation in the classrooms and make them ready and resilient there itself. So thank you very much for adding this value. And Dr. Rashmi, over to you. A question which probably look at the other angle of this report, which talks about the leaders per se in the center of the mental wellness challenge. So when you build the foundation on mental wellness in an organization, it seems that everybody goes back and says the pyramid is such that there are 10 leaders and 1,000 people. So the leaders are responsible and the people below them need to be beneficiaries. But what happens to the mental wellness of the leaders themselves? So why do matters of executive isolation, loneliness at the workplace, loneliness at the top, they go unreported quite often, and ultimately what's its impact on the ecosystem at large? So let's talk about that strata, which we are talking about saying are responsible for everything that will change the emotional wellness. Over to you for that.
Yeah, it's like who treats the doctor, right? Doctor treats everyone who treats the doctor. See, like I'll come back to what Anupal was saying as well. Like there is a difference in between recognizing and knowing. the leaders are drivers, influencers in any organization. So they are supposed to be a drive. They're supposed to drive the organization. They're supposed to influence the organization. They are supposed to take care of the people. Like Rishma was saying, that there is a garden and the garden needs to be maintained, and it's leaders' responsibility to do that. So at times what happens, what I've seen in my practice, that leaders struggle with this subconscious bias towards themselves when it comes to seeking support and acceptance, that and they distract themselves, that a lot of problems I have to solve, I have this, I have that is burning, this is burning, and then they think that if they are able to solve others' problem, they are good enough, they are good, they do not need therapy, they do not need assistance. So this is a subconscious bias that they struggle with, and that's why I'm saying it's subconscious, because if consciously they are aware of it, and they identify it, they accept it, they will go for it. Because if you have to go to EAP, nobody knows, it's a confidentiality thing, it goes confidential, but it's a subconscious bias. They think that I'm looking after these many people, what's going to happen to me? Okay, so this is something that's in general happening, or I'm too busy to deal with other people's problem that I can't look after myself. I don't have time for myself, and then whatever time is left, then I have to spend with my family because I have responsibility over there. So it's basically maintaining that balance, maintaining that integration. You ask leaders, and I have asked one leader once in a session, and you wouldn't believe what I got out, because I said, okay, work life, and he was saying that there's too much work, there's too much responsibility, and I said, what do you mean, like, and you're coping all right? And he said, I'm absolutely coping wonderfully, because in the morning I do this, da 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 da, in the evening when I go home I do this, da 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 da. And then I said that, what do you do for yourself? And no response. So there's no time. They're not making themselves time for themselves, for their own self, and forgetting that when the plane, when we go on the plane, the first thing is, when there is a problem, you put mask on yourself. And that's the main reason that they lose track as well when it comes to well-being in the organization. So I think it's basically being conscious about your own self, your own needs, your own requirements, understanding yourself as a human being as well as a leader of an organization, understanding the responsibility of your responsibility towards yourself, as well as the responsibility that you have towards others. And when they don't do it because they're too busy to do it, it goes unnoticed, and they don't seek help. So yeah, that's what I think.
Thank you for that, Dr. Rashmi. Just in everybody else's experiences, including you, Dr. Rashmi, are there frequent events or episodes where leaders actually approach you to say that, yes, I also need support on emotional wellness, or it's a very, very uncommon or a very sporadic event where you'll actually find a leader walking in and saying, hey, you know what, I really, really don't feel in the right emotional space at this point of time. While I know employees at various levels go to their leaders, but do leaders approach CHROs? Do they approach their own HR heads to say, I also need support? Has that been a common experience that practice exists, or it's very, very seldom?
See, these days, both two things are there that I'll answer. One, when we talk about EAP employee assistance, leaders do not have to tell anyone. They are just like any other employee when they need help. So nobody has to know. They don't have to contact HR to get help, not as any other employee as well. But to answer your question, do leaders come? Up till senior managers, it's very common to come and seek help. But above that, when it comes to director level, it's not that common. They do not come, and they do come only, like, for example, I do go in some organizations for mental health awareness sessions and the behavior management and all those sessions. So when I get acquainted to some of the leaders, those leaders who know me, they approach through the same channel, but they approach. So I don't know, this is the resistance they feel. I don't know what it is, but they usually do not come. The director level, we don't see often. But yeah, up to senior
I
manager level.
see, Rashmi, I hear you
So-
as well. Maybe just another 20 seconds, contribution, Rishi, to that comment. Yes, it's lonely at the top, very clear. People need help, that's also very clear. Do people voice out? No, it's not so clear in that sense. I think vulnerability is something which is not easy for all of us to express, particularly when we reach a particular level in our seniority in our careers as well. Being vulnerable there's a stigma attached to it as well, and this is something that we should normalize it. The more we normalize vulnerability, I have difficult situations, so do you, and it's human in both ends. I think that normalization still hasn't happened. The more we normalize it and bring the humanness out first, higher possibility that at least not 10, but maybe at least 1 out of 10 will come out. That's a good number as well, 1 out of 10. So normalization is something which is key, which I don't see it happening regularly. I also think there's an element of men and women over here. There's a gender element as well. That cannot be ignored as well. So that's firstly my view. Over to you, Rishi. I won't take much of your time. Thanks.
Interestingly, so executive isolation is a topic of my ongoing PhD right now. And the responses that I've got is they say that, one is that if somebody comes to know, our career can be stopped. Because in the leadership, people will not appreciate that we need help. They'll say, this guy has emotional wellness issues, just stop where he or she is and let some other pass. I was really intrigued by what responses I got during my. And to some people, they said that it is a social segment. We cannot walk out to our houses. And in the friends and family network, people realizing that we are dealing with emotional and wellness issues. So, those were three major factors. The one was we don't know whether somebody will believe us or not. The second was it's a social stigma. The third, they were pretty clear that if somebody knows about it, our career will stop. And for that reason, I think it becomes much more critical to ensure that there are subtle messages in an organization that this is not about your career, it is about you. Understand before recognizing. And in the interest of time, probably I'll just take a minute to summarize our conversations. And we started with Ronal and Arun talking about the importance of the and specifically brings out the fact that it is so critical and important in how the leadership operates and impacts an organization. Anupal spoke about making it very simple for all of us that we understand, recognize, and employ, and see how pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and post-pandemic the situations have worked. And Rishma, your analogy of a garden, and you just have to ensure that the garden is in the color you want. It's not negotiable. It's something which I think everybody should go back and now sit on the tables and believe it's not negotiable. Give time to it. And agreeing to what Dr. Rashmi mentioned, our leaders are still at a level where maybe the silos and the barriers have not been broken in terms of they also integrating themselves to the whole process. So as she mentioned, EAP is for everyone. But maybe the leader is not carrying just his or her own stress, but the stress of the people, personally and professionally. There is an ongoing debate as well that somebody is bringing the personal challenges to the workplace, which cannot be avoided. What role and responsibility an organization has. So I think those elements have been very, very critical. So in the larger context, let a human being be treated like the way help is needed rather than the levels as we are. I still have to wrap my head around the fact that we can quantify that at a senior manager level, people are still open. But the moment it moves to the designations beyond at the CXOs, it becomes completely a walled garden. I just hope that all the leaders listening to us also realize that their challenges are also equally important as the challenges of their team. And with that, with due permission from all of you, I thank all of you for being a part of this wonderful, wonderful conversation. And I'm sure audiences will look at reaching out to you. And we need to also play probably the link where the report can be downloaded. And with that, a lot of questions, a lot of controversial opinion, probably a lot of new practices will come in the corporate, where then they would want that to be implemented. But as you all are proponents of emotional wellness, just ensure that the word hears it in larger resonance. I think it's not a problem. And for me, thank you very much. I have always enjoyed being a part of such lovely conversations and learning from all of you. Helps me stay more agile in the academic ecosystem that we are in. And if anybody of you, by the way, would like to help those students begin their wellness learning today, it might be a good favor to the society at large. So, Sonu, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity and letting us know about this initiative. The rest for probably the group screen to be available for people to take advantage.
Thank you everyone for this very engaging conversation. On behalf of GI Group Holding India, again thank everyone in the panel, everyone who's in the audience, and do download the report. I think in a few minutes you will be able to download the report. We'll shortly display the link, or if you just go to the GI Group India website, you will be able to find it in the media section. Thank you and look forward to staying in touch with all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's the place to download the report from, gi.co.in, and please make use of the report. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.